The Venezuelan government presents new evidence of links between opposition groups, U.S. and Colombia to destabilize the government. The PT presents a new impeachment request against President Bolsonaro amid the rising coronavirus deaths. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley and other Caribbean leaders participate in the 73rd World Health Assembly. Hello, welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is from the South. The Venezuelan government has revealed new evidence that directly links opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó to a document signed with U.S. security company Silvercup USA. Vice President for Communications Jorge Rodriguez denounced the opposition lawmaker for continuously attacking national sovereignty and promoting foreign intervention. Rodriguez revealed more evidence that demonstrates the close relationship between U.S. President Donald Trump, Colombian President Iván Duque, and extremist Venezuelan opposition groups linked to Colombian drug traffickers. The Venezuelan vice president stressed that they continue to conspire against the country.
That's the criminal triangle that includes the U.S. administration, that includes Duque's government, that includes Juan Guaidó and his henchmen, and also includes notorious Colombian drug lords and at least one Venezuelan drug trafficker.
Protesters in the city of El Alto blocked the main highway to demand food and democratic elections in Bolivia. The protesters were demanding that the de facto government steps down and allow the country to hold elections immediately. They have accused it of failing to address the social and economic challenges the people are facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The social movements of La Paz have signed a joint declaration stating they will all mobilize if the de facto government doesn't announce a date for democratic elections immediately.
We can't accept that in such a short space of time they have indebted us with the IMF. They continue to indebt us with the World Bank. So it's not right that then they say that there's no money for the poor. Everything is at risk. Mining is at risk. The issue of GMO crops as well. It's a transmitter of cancer for all humanity at a global level. I'm certain that this example will be replicated across all the departments of Bolivia, because Bolivia must be respected. The only thing this government must do is through the electoral authorities led by Salvador Romero, is to tell us a date for these elections, in a formal manner. If they refuse then, they are responsible for the actions that people will take in response.
Here is the Indigenous Women's Federation, Neighborhood Federation, National Miners Federation, Bolivian Labor Union Federation, transport workers and other sectors that are signing this interinstitutional agreement to defend sovereignty and democracy.
Let's turn to our correspondent, Freddy Morales, who has more on the situation in El Alto.
We're in District 7 of the city of El Alto on the highway that connects to cities in the border with Peru. The neighbors here are demanding that the government gives them permission so that most business can operate and people can return to work. These are small business owners and they want authorities to ease restrictions after more than 50 days under lockdown. They say they have run out of money. They're also demanding a legitimate government, meaning an election in the next 90 days. Also, 1,000 workers and campesino associations have declared their communities in emergency. They're also denouncing acts of corruption by the government, the lack of COVID-19 testing kits, and UCI equipments for hospitals. There are also blockades in Cochabamba and in Potosí.
That was Freddy Morales in Bolivia. Social organizations in Ecuador have taken to the streets to protest against the government and its austerity measures during the pandemic. Workers, students, and other organizations protested in the capital, Quito, against a new law approved by the National Assembly. They rejected that the law includes dismissal of labor laws that protected workers from massive layoffs. They also rejected recent cuts in education.
University students have come here to protest yet again to demand the resignation of the Finance Minister Richard Martinez for authorizing the cuts to education across the country, despite the fact that it was prohibited by the Constitutional Court. We are also showing support to workers and reject the 2 new laws approved to allow layoffs. We will continue fighting until the government returns education funds.
Meanwhile, the former director of risk assessment, Alexandra Ocles, has given her statement during a trial against her for alleged corruption. She's accused of approving an overpriced government food aid program for those affected by the lockdown due to the pandemic. This adds to several authorities from the Lenín Moreno government under investigation for profiting off the pandemic. For the second year in a row, the Cap Haitian Flag Day parade has been cancelled. In 2019, the event was shut down due to safety issues caused by a political crisis. And this year, the novel coronavirus has prevented the celebration. The first purely Haitian flag was adopted on May 18, 1803. The chief of the Black Rebels, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and leader of the Mulattoes, Alexandre Pétion, stopped fighting alongside the French in February. Dessalines removed the white band from the French flag used in Haiti during the French rule, creating the first Haitian flag, a symbol of the alliance of blacks and mulattoes in their fight for freedom. He ordered that the phrase "freedom or death" be inscribed on this flag. Meanwhile, mass protests have rocked Haiti on what would have been their National Flag Day celebrations. Police in armored vehicles were deployed to quell hundreds of demonstrators using tear gas to disperse the crowd. Protesters are upset over fuel shortages, high inflation, and alleged corruption. They are also accusing the government of using COVID-19 as a smokescreen to continue what they call their illegal occupation of office and to discourage people from mobilizing. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Now on more news on the pandemic. The Brazilian Ministry of Health reported on Sunday that the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country had surpassed 240,000. According to the latest report, the virus has killed over 16,000 people in Brazil. The state of Sao Paulo, one of the worst hit in the country, now has more than 60,000 cases and nearly 5,000 deaths. The Municipal Health Bureau of the state capital announced on Sunday that there had been a 400% increase in COVID-19 deaths from April 9th to May 15th and warned that the public health system could collapse within 15 days unless a stricter quarantine and social distancing measures were adopted. The country now ranks 5th in the world in terms of number of cases. Pressure is mounting on the Brazilian president as calls for his impeachment continue. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Meir, has more.
The death toll for coronavirus has just surpassed 16,000 in Brazil, and there's more and more pressure on far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro to resign, and more pressure on Congress to impeach him. On Friday, the PT party filed its first impeachment request with Congress, along with two other left-wing parties and a group of 200 civil society organizations, including social movements, professional organizations, and labor unions. The reason that the PT took so long to act is because it's worried about what will happen if Bolsonaro is really taken out of office, because his vice president is a military general, and this could seemingly return Brazil to something similar to the era of the military dictatorship. There's already 8 military generals serving as cabinet ministers for Bolsonaro and over 1,300 military officers serving in the executive branch of the government. The government's already been militarized. So the other strategy of the PT has been to work to cancel the 2018 presidential elections for fraud. And a new revelation has come out which looks like the chances of this actually happening could be stronger now. As reported in Brazil de Fato, it's just been revealed that the federal police deliberately suppressed information about one of the members of Jair Bolsonaro's son Flavio's cabinet in the State Congress of Rio de Janeiro, performing money laundering operations for paramilitary organized crime groups called militias. What's come out is that the federal police in Rio de Janeiro hid this information from the press until after the elections to help Bolsonaro's chances at winning the presidency. His popularity rating is still at 27%, so the PT is working at the base level with its partners in the social movements and the labor unions and church groups to reduce his support under 20%. At that moment, they think an impeachment can successfully move forwards.
That was Brian Meir in Brazil. The 73rd World Health Assembly is taking place, with world leaders convening virtually for the first time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The ambassador of the Bahamas, Keva Bain, has been elected to the presidency of the assembly.
We convene the 73rd Assembly during an unprecedented time in history when the global community is faced with negative health, social, and economic effects of the spread of the coronavirus. And the Assembly convened virtually, bringing together participants from across the globe. The public health community has faced challenges in the past. Global health issues transcend national boundaries and governments and call for action on the part of the global forces that determine the health of people.
As we request assistance to address COVID-19 in the Bahamas and in other small island states, we urge the international community to adopt and to appreciate a broader understanding of the developmental levels and the unique local circumstances in our states.
The Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, spoke about the situation in her country and in the CARICOM region.
Our CARICOM heads of government adopted a whole of government and a whole of society approach. In addition, we reached to our Caribbean neighbor Cuba and received hundreds of doctors and nurses to help us. I take this opportunity to thank our brothers and sisters in Cuba and the government of the Republic of Cuba in particular for its unswerving assistance during this pandemic. It has been palpable and clear to all of our population. So, our CARICOM family banded together to lock down and ride out this first wave. And it has been a long and treacherous wave. The closing of our borders and the trebling of unemployment and the reduction of our government revenues by half have created grave challenges for many of us. Similarly, the psyche of people in our hemisphere has been disturbed. For the majority of persons under the age of 70 in the Caribbean, many of whom have never had to confront grave challenges, the world appears to be on autopilot. They wonder who is in control and where is the leadership? Where is the global cooperation that they so expected? And for too many of our citizens globally, life has become a game of roulette, betting on numbers and colors and ignoring the science that needs to underpin our actions.
Cuba's Minister of Public Health described the country's experience in fighting COVID-19, saying that the crisis turned into an opportunity for global solidarity. He said the U.S. blockade failed to stifle medical collaboration.
This was not prevented by the genocidal blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba, which had been cruelly stepped up, nor the attempts of the government of this country to discredit and hinder medical cooperation from Cuba. President, no country can face this crisis alone. There needs to be a world-level response based on unity, solidarity, and multilateral cooperation. Cuba reiterates to the WHO and its member states its willingness to cooperate and share our modest experience. Thank you.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said Africa is extremely vulnerable to COVID-19 and that it is the poor worldwide who suffer the most. He said all nations must have equal access to medical technologies and stressed the importance of international solidarity.
For its part, South Africa is participating in several research initiatives. We must ensure that there is equitable access to medical equipment, technologies in all respects. In this final decade towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, we must press ahead with our goal of making universal health care a reality for all the people of the world, and no one must be left behind. The virus has demonstrated the essential value of universal health coverage, and this is where we need full solidarity.
Cuban doctors who are in South Africa to help the country fight COVID-19 have started working in various hospitals. The first group has already arrived in the Northwest province, while the other medical experts are still finalizing orientation training on the South African situation before being deployed to other health facilities in the country.
Of the 13 healthcare professionals, 8 are family physicians. Of the family physicians, 4 is allocated to the Bajanala districts, and 2 to the Kenneth Kaunda district, and 1 each to the RSM and NMM district. In Bajanala district, being the epicenter of our epidemic in Northwest province, they will be distributed between the Rustenburg area and the Madibeng sub-district.
Now we head to the United States. Workers in the sanitary sector in New Orleans have gone on strike to demand personal protective equipment and hazard pay amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The garbage collectors are demanding paid sick leave, $15 per hour hazard pay, and a written agreement from their employer stipulating that it will ensure safety measures according to Phase 1 guidelines. The workers say they are not going to back down the protests, which they started early this month, until their demands are met.
My name is Quest. I'm with the New Orleans Workers Group. We are a group of workers who believe and know from the core of us that only the collective organizing of workers is going to liberate us from this oppressive white supremacist capitalist system. We understand that capitalism finds a way to trickle its way into all corners and pockets and nooks and crannies of our society, of our economy, of our being. That you can, yes, also be a black capitalist and exploit black workers. And that's a bit of what brought us out here today. We stand in solidarity with the City Waste Union. We are proud of these brothers, proud of these men, these fathers, these essential frontline workers, these heroes of our community who have been paving a path to a pandemic.
We'll be right back with more news. Thank you for joining us again. At least 20 civilians have been killed in a Boko Haram attack in a village northeast of Nigeria. According to security officials, the attackers invaded the village in several pickup trucks and fired rocket-propelled grenades on homes in Gajigana village. Boko Haram fighters have been targeting the area for the past 10 years, and more than 36,000 people have been killed in the insurgencies.
The Boko Haram started shooting sporadically before reaching the military camp. The aircraft arrived and fired them back. As a result, they just engaged in shooting sporadically into town. Up to now, we have evacuated about 25 people and we buried about 12. We cannot specify the figures left behind, but for these people, we brought them for an immediate treatment.
Forces of the Libyan Government of National Accord have captured the strategic Al-Watiya airbase from fighters loyal to General Khalifa Haftar. Military spokesman Mohamed Egnunu posted on his Twitter account that GNA forces had taken over the entire base near the Tunisian border and seized large quantities of ammunition belonging to Haftar fighters. Allahu Akbar. Campaigning for Burundi's general election goes into full swing. General Evariste Ndayishimiye will be the ruling party's candidate, replacing outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza. The elections will be held on Wednesday. In Lesotho, a new premier will be sworn in on Tuesday after the Prime Minister's party accepted his resignation. The All Basotho Convention accepted the decision after Thomas Tabane said he was stepping down following months of pressure. He's accused of murdering his former wife in 2017, 2 days before he was sworn in as Prime Minister. Italy has lifted most of the coronavirus restrictions for the first time after 2 months of the lockdown. Various businesses, churches, and recreational facilities have been permitted to open with strict requirements to adhere to safety rules. Italy is one of the countries worst affected by the pandemic, but it is following other European nations who have eased restrictions that were applied to curb the pandemic.
I've been used to going to church since I was a little girl, and after all that silence, which has become almost a spiritual silence, one feels the need to find a spiritual breath.
China has pledged $2 billion towards economic recovery and social development in COVID-19 affected nations, particularly in developing countries.
China will provide $2 billion over 2 years to help with COVID-19 response with economic and social development in affected countries, especially developing countries. China will establish a cooperation mechanism for its hospitals to pair up with 30 African hospitals and accelerate the building of the Africa CDC headquarters to help the continent ramp up its disease preparedness and control capacity.
And we continue in China. The country is taking strict measures to control the spread of COVID-19 after new local cases were detected in the last weeks, raising alarms on a possible second wave of infections.
China is driving the resumption of school and economic activities, but the fears of a second wave of COVID-19 contagion have also increased after the resurgence of local infection cases of the new coronavirus in the provinces of Jilin and Heilongjiang in the northeast of the country and in the city of Wuhan. This has forced the authorities to reactivate the emergency levels.
In response to the infection rates, the provinces of Heilongjiang, Jilin, and Hubei, the Joint Prevention and Control Mechanism of the Council of States, and the National Health Commission have recently sent out guidelines for the prevention and control of the pandemic in all local communities.
In order to stop the spread of the disease and maintain what has been achieved until now in the battle against the new coronavirus, China has announced new radical measures. All 11 million residents of Wuhan will undertake the nucleic acid test, and the quarantine was restored in several regions of Jilin and Heilongjiang.
We are conducting nucleic acid tests for all residents, which is a huge task in terms of social mobilization and organization. The main goal is to further identify the scope of the epidemic, to detect the virus in a proactive way, and intensify monitoring and detection.
Other actions to avoid new contagions will be maintained, including temperature controls, the use of a mask, the requirement of presenting digital health codes, among others.
Here in the city, we keep prevention measures, especially to return to work. It is very important to be safe, and that is why we use masks, we apply social distance, and the disinfection of the areas.
After more than 84,000 cases and almost 5,000 deaths, China takes a first step towards normality, but without abandoning prevention measures and seeking by all ways to avoid a second wave. The experiences of China can serve other nations that are now beginning the reopening after overcoming the worst stage of the outbreak.
And Japan's economy has gone into a recession due to the coronavirus crisis. According to the Japanese government, the gross domestic product shrunk by 3.4% in the January-March period from the previous quarter. Japan was less affected by the virus compared to other developed economies, with just over 16,000 cases and around 750 deaths. But as the pandemic hit the global economy, the country's exports were among the worst affected, falling by 6% compared to the previous quarter. And with that, we end our news brief, but you can find these and more stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. And be sure to find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.